Thank you. So in today's agenda, I'm going to quickly go over some tips and tricks, as I promised you guys that every Lunch and Learn, we're going to do a quick tips and tricks to help you out. And then I'm going to introduce you to Vince Fung. He's our keynote speaker on cybersecurity. As well, he's going to quickly show us some of the things that we're going to need to know for our cybersecurity training for this year. And then we're going to have a little bit of a questions and answer session if there are any. With that being said, this month's tips and tricks is managing your password for apps and browsers on your mobile device. If you don't know already, in your setting for both Android and Apple, there is a place where it hosts and holds all of the passwords that you have auto-filled for all of your apps. In this place right here, in the setting piece, you'll find some features such as the autofill features and the security recommendation. I highly recommend that you guys go to this section and check, because you'll see that with the security recommendation, it lets you know if your password has been compromised, leaked, risk levels that it's at, and where you've reused the same passwords over and over again. Because we've had tons of breaches with Apple, Google, the CRA, it will let you know if you've browsed to those sites and if those passwords have been risked. So it's a pretty neat place. Do check it. What it will allow you to do is it shows you all of the different apps that you've looked at. It actually shows you the password that you've used in those sites. You can actually go to those websites, the direct links to it, and change it. Or you can delete those passwords so that it's not sitting on your phone. So that's the tips and tricks. I wanted to use this one in particular because it aligns with the security chat that we're going to be talking about today on the Lunch and Learn. So with that being said, and with no further ado, I'm going to introduce you guys to Vince Fung. He is the CEO of Expera / Debian IT. Many of you have heard him before, but he is an excellent speaker in regards to the cybersecurity space. He's delivered these talks in many venues all across America, including with Microsoft, NASDAQ, New York City Bar Association, Harvard Club, and on and on and on. He's got a huge credential behind him to speak on this matter. But most importantly, Vince is our partner with Expera. They are our third provider IT support, and they are going to be helping us with kicking off the cybersecurity training for 2021. As many of you guys know, last year, that training is mandatory, and it is essential for us to survive as an organization. We need to be aware, alert, and have full understanding of what we need to do when we get these type of attacks so that we are prepared and that we are doing our utmost to protect our infrastructure. So with that being said, I'm just going to hand this over to Vince to begin the Lunch and Learn on cybersecurity. All yours, Vince.
All right. Thanks so much, Amanda. Okay, so if you guys can see my screen, if you don't mind just typing Y in the chat, that would be awesome. Don't see anything in the chat. Are you guys able to see me okay? Perfect. All right. Okay, let's get things kicked off here. Okay, so as Amanda mentioned, the presentation today is going to be recorded. So for those of you who I've not yet had the pleasure of meeting, my name is Vince Fung. I am the founder and CEO here at Expera IT. Would love to stay in touch with you afterwards, so feel free to follow me on Twitter, send me a connection request on LinkedIn, Or if you have any questions afterwards, shoot me an email and I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have. As Amanda mentioned, I do get to speak at a lot of venues across North America. I've spoken at a lot of different events. Unfortunately, due to COVID, haven't been able to travel, but I'm excited that things are opening back up and I'll get to go back on the speaking circuit again. So as Amanda mentioned, this is the presentation on cyber awareness safety, which is a really important topic for businesses. The unfortunate thing is that the approach that most people take towards their online safety is something like taking this car that you might drive on the weekends and parking it in a dark alley. And not only do they park in a dark alley, but they're leaving the windows rolled down, the doors are unlocked, they got a few $100 bills spread out on the dashboard. You kind of get the idea. So it's not that people are necessarily reckless. It's just that a lot of people still don't really understand who and what they're up against in terms of the cyber threats. Hey, I love this comic here by John Klausner. He actually says, in this corner, we've got firewalls, encryption, antivirus software, the greatest technology tools needed to keep you safe and secure. And in this corner, we have Dave, AKA human error. And this is kind of the reality that we're in right now, is that hackers don't hack systems, they're hacking people. They're tricking people to do things they're not supposed to. And when I talk to a lot of people about cyber threats, this is still what I hear from the majority of people I talk to is they're saying, oh, but we're too small. I've got nothing to hide. Nobody would bother to hack us. A lot of people still don't think it's going to happen to them, of course, until it happens. And I even hear from various companies where they say, oh, we don't really have a lot of money in the bank account. We don't have a lot of assets. How can they steal something from somebody that's got nothing to steal? Hey, the truth is, cyber attacks have become the #1 business risk. So more so than any other type of potential disaster that a business could face, a cyber attack is the one thing that could potentially cause a business to close their doors forever. Okay, and the only way that we can stay safe is by creating a culture of security. So it really requires everybody getting involved and doing their part to create this environment where we help to keep Pieridae Energy safe from all of these types of cyber attacks. Because we can put all of these security tools in place, like window bars, alarm systems, door locks, cameras, all of this fun stuff. But all it takes is somebody forgetting to close the door, or maybe somebody leaving a ladder in the backyard that they can use to climb up to an unlocked window, or accidentally leaving a lock unlocked. And all of those layers of security that we put in place can potentially get bypassed. And not only is it just about forgetting to do things, the hackers are actively exploiting people to try and get them to purposely leave vulnerabilities in place so that they can exploit them. As I mentioned, hackers don't hack systems, they're hacking people. So just to drive this point home, I'd like to share with you a story. This is a true story of a company. So when I get phone calls before 6 a.m. in the morning, usually they're not good things. So when I picked up the phone that morning, this is what I've heard. Hey, Vince, this is George from TriWest Airlines. We need help. We've been hacked. And he goes on to tell me, my IT manager, Dave, says we've been hit with ransomware. All of our computers are down. Our aircraft maintenance database is down. And he's been mucking around for 3 days now, and we're still down. So I get Dave on the phone just to question him a little bit more about what's been happening. And I ask him about backups, and he says, oh, backups. Yeah, they deleted all of our backups. The last good backup we have is 1.5 years old. Oh, and they're demanding 5 Bitcoin in payment. And if you guys have been watching Bitcoin prices lately, 5 Bitcoin is a lot of money. But then he goes and tells me, oh, I've been emailing the ransomers. I'm telling them there's no way we're willing to pay that much. I said, whoa, Dave, unless you're a professional hostage negotiator, let's not piss these guys off, because without a good backup, you're out of options. Okay, so George comes back on the phone and he tells me, yeah, they got in using our sales manager's password. He apparently clicked on a phishing scam. Oh, and we were also missing a whole bunch of security updates, which is why it spread across the network so quickly. And the situation we're in with all the servers being down, our aircraft maintenance database being down, we're out of ideas here. We've got aircraft maintenance records for the next 7 days, but once those run out, all of the planes, 27 aircraft, they're going to be sitting on the ground, because we can't fly those planes if we don't know what parts need to get swapped out. we're going to be in breach of literally millions of dollars worth of contracts with our clients. And then he started breaking down. He said, this company that Dad founded, that we've been building for the last 52 years, we're literally hours from going out of business. We're finished. So they called us in. And we don't quite look this cool, but maybe Julius actually looks kind of like that. But we spent almost an entire week of sleepless nights at their offices. We built this mini skyscraper of empty pizza boxes, mini mountain of empty Red Bull cans, and in the end, we were able to clean up their systems and get everything up and running again. But without a backup, they had no choice but to pay the ransom. They paid a lot of money. They were lucky that when they gave the money to the bad guys, they actually got a key that actually allowed us to decrypt the files. But even with that key, it takes a long time to rebuild their systems, to decrypt the data and get everything back up and running. So it was literally right down to the wire. We were able to keep their planes in the air, so they didn't have to cancel any of the flights. But when the dust settled, George grabbed me and we sat down in his office and he said, how could we have prevented this? How could we have avoided all of this disruption, all of this chaos, all of the additional costs that were involved in getting systems back up and running, dealing with upset clients, dealing with all the stress and anxiety around possibly going out of business and having to shut down the operations? So the answer to that is, what part can you play to actually help keep us all safe? So over at Pieridae Energy, you guys have a lot of systems and a lot of things that are absolutely critical to the operation of the business. And it's all about building that culture of security that I talked about. And that culture of security is essential to making sure that a cyber attack doesn't cause a major issue. So to really understand how to fight cybercrime, we need to understand why cybercrime has gotten so bad over the last few years, because 5 or 6 years ago, we didn't even hear hardly anything about cyber attacks shutting down businesses. But today on the news, almost on a daily basis, you're hearing about several companies that are getting hit with all these types of attacks. Okay, we also need to understand who the bad actors are. And then we'll take a look at what exactly we are up against so that you can look at what things you need to do to protect yourself. Okay, so to understand why it's gotten so bad, the reality is that cybercrime is a business, okay, and it's big business. So if you wanted to, let's rewind the clock, maybe 100 or so years. Way back in the day, if you wanted to get into the business of crime, all you had to do was buy a gun or a knife and hide in a dark alley. When somebody walked around the corner, you'd pull out your knife and say, stick them up. And you'd be able to steal their wallet, their watch, any jewelry they might have on their body. And you'd be able to get some money out of it. Then these criminals who are in the business of crime started asking themselves, well, how do I grow my business? Well, thanks to technology, trains came along. Okay, and they discovered that 2 or 3 guys riding along on horseback in a deserted part of the country could actually stop a steam train, and now they could rob 200 or 300 people at a time. Now they're getting some economies of scale, increased ROI. Okay, fast forward to today. If you look at some of the big cyber attacks in recent history, that eBay hack, 145 million accounts compromised. So at no point in the history of mankind has one person been able to rob 145 million people in one shot. But the reality today is that it's actually happening, and it's happening almost every single day. Okay, so to understand why this is worth money to the bad guys, 145 million accounts, how much could that possibly be worth? Hey, let's take a look at this thing called the dark web. Hey, we're familiar with the internet, and the sites that you guys often use are probably sites like Wikipedia, Google, Bing, all the commonly used sites that you use to surf the web. Hey, below that is a section of the internet called the deep web, and these generally require special access. So they're still legitimate websites, but you might need a subscription or you might need special authority in order to actually access those parts of the internet. So academic information, medical records, government resources, that type of stuff is actually what's found in the deep web. Below that is the underbelly of the internet, known as the dark web. Okay, the dark web is accessed using a browser called Tor, which stands for the Onion Router, which actually allows the people that are accessing the dark web to hop across like dozens or even hundreds of computers around the globe in order to mask where they are actually coming from, essentially making the connection anonymous. Okay, because the connection is anonymous, it allows the people that operate in the dark web to do all kinds of illegal things, like trading illegal information, selling illegal drugs, buying and selling weapons. You can even buy organs or hire a hitman on the dark web. Okay, so on the dark web is a series of markets where people can actually buy and sell stolen information. Okay, and if you take a look at what things are worth on the dark web, like a social security number is worth about $1 a piece. Credit card details are worth anywhere from $2 to $40, depending on how much information it came with, which means that eBay hack, where they compromised 145 million accounts, was worth roughly $300 million on the low end of the scale. Okay, and you can see there's all kinds of other things that are worth a lot of money on the dark web as well. Okay, another reason why cybercrime has gotten so bad in recent years is because of the prevalence of cryptocurrencies, like Bitcoin and Ethereum and various other ones out there are unregulated, so they're distributed across multiple countries, and they essentially allow people to buy and sell things and transfer very large quantities of money in an anonymous fashion. So this creates a haven for criminals to operate because you can transfer literally millions of dollars and it's untraceable. All right, so who are the bad guys? Who are these bad actors that we are up against that are perpetrating all of these different types of attacks? Okay, when people think about hackers, a lot of people are still thinking of this guy. Okay, the pimply teenager in mommy's dark, damp basement, working away on the keyboard in the glow of a computer screen. But this is not your stereotypical hacker. The hackers today are highly sophisticated criminals and state actors that we have to actually protect your business against. So one of the most interesting ones operates out of this building, which is a building just northeast of Shanghai. It belongs to the People's Liberation Army, Unit 61398. If you actually Google it, there's tons of really interesting information about them. In this army unit, every single day, roughly 3,000 people show up to work, and their sole job is to hack into foreign governments, hack into foreign infrastructures, hack into foreign corporations that have interesting intellectual property to steal their stuff so that China can gain a competitive advantage. So this is a highly sophisticated, well-funded, well-educated opponent that we have to protect your business against. Okay, another type of opponent we have to fight against are people that subscribe to crimeware as a service. Okay, so when Canada legalized pot a couple years back, a whole bunch of criminals that were selling marijuana on the streets suddenly went out of business. So they were looking at other ways that they could actually get into other money-making ventures. And one of those ventures was to subscribe to crimeware as a service. So these criminals are not technically sophisticated themselves, but the people that write the software are highly sophisticated hackers and programmers that actually write programs that allow you to actually hack into computer systems and steal information, launch attacks. And they're, instead of getting their own hands dirty, they're essentially selling it to other criminals, and they're just taking a cut of whatever they steal. Okay, the most interesting type of crimeware as a service is ransomware as a service, and you guys probably heard of that Colonial Pipeline hack that happened about a month and a half ago. That was actually done by the Dark Side Ransomware Group, which is a ransomware as a service group. So they don't actually do a lot of the work themselves. They actually sell their services to other criminals who launch the attacks, and then when they get in is actually when they actually get involved and continue the extortion. Other groups that we're up against are criminal venture capitalists. So these groups are actually where if you actually made a ton of money way back in the day doing illegal stuff and you didn't want to get your hands bloody anymore, you can actually put your money in these criminal venture capital funds and fund up-and-coming baby criminals that have interesting ideas to scam and hack people to make a ton of money. Okay, other groups we're up against include terrorist and extremist groups. Okay, a lot of these organizations are using cybercrime to make money to fund their activities. And of course, there's the good old mafia, who doesn't operate the same way they used to 100 years ago. Like, these guys are highly sophisticated, and they are also operating various cyber criminal rings to make money that way. All right, so now that we know who the opponents are, what exactly is it we're up against? What do we need to protect ourselves from? Okay, so we have all of these different types of attacks and different types of scams and illegal activities happening on the internet, but it can seem almost daunting to keep protected from this, right? Like, we have all these different opponents, but the reality is you have to remember that cyber criminals are in the business of crime. Okay, what we need to do is just put enough security layers in place to make it difficult enough that they're going to move on to a better target. Okay, so that's what we have to do, is just essentially ruin their return on investment. Okay, the unfortunate thing about protection is defense is really hard, because the threat that we're protecting you against is asymmetrical, right? For us, we have to get things right 100% of the time. For the bad guys, all they have to do is get it right once, and they can potentially get in, which is why we actually take an approach to having multiple layers of security, okay? Because we expect that some layers are ultimately going to get breached, and the hope is that we have enough layers in place so that even though they get through several layers, they're not able to get through all of them. Okay? And part of the layers of security that we put in place is actually the education piece of making sure that everybody that's in this call and everybody that watches this afterwards knows what they need to do and do their part in actually making sure that everybody's protected. So one of my favorite quotes is actually from Andy Grove, who was the former CEO of Intel. He said, "Success breeds complacency, complacency breeds failure, only the paranoid survive." In the world that we live in today, we absolutely have to be paranoid, because there's a lot of crazy stuff that's happening out there. They're using very devious ways to actually get access to people, tricking people to do things. So if something doesn't quite seem right, it probably isn't right. So it's okay to be a little bit paranoid, because it's a crazy world out there. Okay, so let's look at the top 3 risks that a business faces. Okay, the top 3 risks are essentially stolen credentials, unpacked software, and the third one is people getting tricked to do things they're not supposed to. Okay, so I want to dive into each one of these areas in a little bit more detail as I actually talk about some of the threats that we're up against. So the first threat I'm going to talk about is phishing. Okay, you guys have probably all seen various phishing attempts, because this is the most common type of attack. And the most common way that hackers are actually gaining access into a network is actually still through spam. Okay, according to Brian Krebs, spam remains the single biggest driver of big data breaches today. Okay, because it's the easiest way to get things in. And I often get asked, well, why can't my spam filter just block everything? Well, the unfortunate reality is that, remember, these guys are highly sophisticated, highly funded criminal groups, and they're always trying to find ways to bypass the filters, right? They have access to all the filters that we have access to. And a lot of these criminal groups actually have labs set up with all of the different kinds of filters, and they're trying to figure out ways that they can actually word an email or package an email so that it actually sneaks through all of these filters. So the spam filter, although it blocks a lot of the scams, is never, unfortunately, going to be 100%. So some stuff is ultimately still going to get through, and you really just have to be vigilant to look for things that don't quite look right. So here are some examples of phishing scams. So this one here is a scam that looks like it came from PayPal. It says your account has been locked out. Click this button to unlock it. So if you actually, if we actually analyze these types of emails in more detail, like here's another one that looks like it came from PayPal, but this is a variation. This one is actually using the PayPal name, but they're actually saying that you bought something from a vendor that actually uses PayPal for payment systems. So how do you identify whether these are fake or not? Well, okay, here are some of the things to look for. The first is take a look at the email address where the message came from. So the email address likely does not match the contents of the email. So this one actually says it came from PayPal or Newegg, and yet it's coming from johnny@gmail.com, which makes it look very suspicious. Okay, here's another one that's actually a message that looks like a fax message that came in. So if we actually analyze this message, if you look at the email address again, again, it's showing eFax, but if you look at it, it's not coming from the eFax service, it's coming from some weird domain. So it doesn't match the contents of the email. Okay, another thing that you should look for is weird punctuation and formatting. So a lot of scam emails, not all of them, but a lot of them actually still contain weird formatting and punctuation. And I often get asked again, well, if these bad guys are making so much money on these scams, why don't they just pay somebody to make the message look 100% legit? Well, the truth is, if when they make a message look 100% legitimate, almost everybody clicks on it because it just looks too legitimate, and they don't know who the best victims are. So a lot of these hackers are purposely putting these weird punctuation problems in. First of all, to bypass the spam filters, it helps to do that. But secondly, it actually helps with the selection of the victims, because if you're the type of victim that can read through that message, see all these weird errors, and you still click on the link, you're probably a pretty good victim for them, because you're much less likely to notice that you've been compromised, and you're also much less likely to be able to remediate it afterwards. So the third thing that you should look for is the links in these scam messages. Okay, so do not click the link. It's okay to hover over top of it. When you hover over top of it, you can actually see where the link goes to. So this eFax email, when you hover over top of it, actually shows it came from some jimdosite.com, which is obviously not eFax. So this is a surefire way to actually tell that it's actually a scam message. Okay, but actually here's another one that actually is a Microsoft one. So these ones that look like they come from Microsoft are actually becoming more and more common. Like we see ones from Microsoft or OneDrive or DocuSign, like things that actually look like legitimate business things that you're receiving emails from. Again, if you actually look at the email address, the email address does not match the contents of the email. If you hover over top of the link, okay, do not click the link. You can hover over top of it, and this one goes to some spacesavers.com/weird site. So again, the link doesn't look legitimate. So these are the easiest ways to tell when a phishing scam is a phishing scam. Okay, but you have to be a lot more careful than that. Okay, the obvious ones are easy to tell, but not all phishing scams are that obvious. Okay, here's an example of one. Okay, this one came from a contact of mine. I changed the name just to mask it, but this one came from John Gilligan at Acme Corporation, and he's actually a legitimate contact of mine. And then if you hover over top of the link, it actually takes you to a file that's actually stored on Dropbox or OneDrive. Okay, so the weird thing about this is I was not expecting anything from John Gilligan. Like, why would he send me an investment proposal? So these are the questions you have to ask yourself when you're actually looking at these weird emails is, okay, is this something that you're actually expecting from the person? And if it's not, chances are it's actually a phishing scam, because what happened in this case with John Gilligan is that he actually got his email password phished. So the hackers were able to log into his mailbox and sent this message out to everybody in his contact list. So it actually is a message that came from his mailbox, but it's obviously a scam message that contains a link to a file that, if you clicked on, would be a bad situation. Okay, so do not click on the link. Okay, so if in doubt, don't click it. Okay, some of you are probably wondering, okay, well, what happens if I do click on that link? Okay, so here are some of the common things that these links actually do. So one of them is actually it's designed to steal your password. So in some cases, it takes you to a website. So that eFax one or the Microsoft one may actually take you to a site that looks exactly like the eFax site or exactly like the Microsoft site with a username and password field. And if you type in your username and password, guess what happens? The bad guys now have instantly stolen that username and password, just like what happened to John Gilligan. And they can then compromise your email account and send out an email message containing malware or further attacks to all of your contacts. Okay. Other things that they often weaponize these links with is a malware attack. So they sometimes store malware on OneDrive or Dropbox or Google Drive, one of these file sharing sites. That's actually a legitimate file sharing site, but the file itself is malware. So if you clicked on the file, downloaded it, and launched it, most likely it would probably be a ransomware attack where it would actually go and encrypt all of your files and possibly spread across the network, encrypting all the files and the entire network as well. So again, if in doubt, do not click the link. We would actually welcome you to actually give us a call before you click on stuff if you're not certain. Just call the help desk and we would be happy to look at it together with you, because the reality is, don't be embarrassed about calling us, because like, we are IT professionals, and to us sometimes we have to really dig deep to be able to identify whether a phishing scam is real or not. So make sure that anytime you're not certain about it, just give us a call and we'd be happy to look at it together with you. Okay, another type of scam that's very, very common that the hackers make a lot of money on these days is spear phishing. Okay, a spear phishing scam is also known as a whaling attack. Okay, spear phishing and whaling attacks are very different than the typical phishing attack. So the typical phishing attack is where the hacker will actually send out a message to hundreds of thousands of people hoping that somebody clicks on it. Whereas in the whaling attack, it's specifically targeted. So they're actually picking companies, researching them, and then actually sending them messages in a very targeted fashion. So the email messages often contain specific information about your company. They might have actually researched that maybe there's like a big deal or an acquisition or something that's happening with a company that's available publicly, and they'll reference that in the email. So to the person that opens up the message, they're looking at it going, oh, these guys know so much about the company, it's got to be legitimate, but it's not. So it contains relevant information and sometimes very detailed information with the names of people within the company and so on, because they have actually done research on it. Okay, so these types of scams are actually much harder to detect and they look more genuine. Often what they'll do is either they'll actually phish somebody's password and log in and send a message from that person, or they'll actually register a new domain that looks just like yours. So for example, Pieridae Energy, rather than Pieridae spelt with a P-I-E, they might register a domain that's P1E. And by registering that domain, they can send a message that's from XYZ user at P1E Pieridaeenergy.com and send a message from that. And if you're not looking carefully at it, it looks like it came from that legitimate email address. So what exactly do these attacks look like? So they get the message in. The most common way that they monetize these attacks is by launching a wire fraud attack. Okay, so wire fraud is where they trick you to transfer money into an account that belongs to the hacker. Some of the big examples of this are McEwen University a while back actually lost almost $12 million in an online phishing scam. So in this case, somebody actually pretended to be from the accounts receivable department of Clark Builders. And what they did was they sent a message to the accounts payable at McEwen University saying, hey, we've changed our banking information. From now on, please pay all future invoices into this new account number, which of course was the hacker's account number. So McEwen University ended up paying 4 invoices totaling $11.8 million into the hacker's account before Clark Builders actually phoned them up and said, hey, what's going on? You aren't paying our invoices. And they discovered that they were actually scammed. Okay, so they don't just go after the big guys, they're also going after little guys as well, like the McKnight Hockey Association in Calgary, where they were scammed out of $98,000 when somebody pretended to be one of the board of directors members and emailed the treasurer saying, hey, we've made a decision on an investment fund, please transfer $98,000 into this account, which belonged to the hackers, and they took off with the money. So they're stealing from little kids as well. Okay, so these are some of the examples of where people are getting tricked to transfer money. And the only way to really protect yourself against this is to have good policies and procedures and making sure that everybody follows them. Okay, and I'll touch on that a little bit later here. Okay, another type of scam is the iTunes gift card scam, or it doesn't necessarily have to be iTunes, it can be other gift cards as well. Again, this is a spear-phishing attack where somebody pretends to be a manager or the owner of the company, and they will actually email somebody that is either their assistant or like a person that is helping out with tasks around the office, and they'll actually say, "Hey, do you have a minute? I need your help." So that person doesn't realize it's coming from a fake email address. They'll respond, "Yep, I've got a minute. What do you need?" And the boss goes, "I need you to go out and buy me a bunch of iTunes gift cards right away because I need to send them to clients." So the assistant goes out, spends a couple $1,000s buying iTunes gift cards. Then the attacker actually tells them, "Okay, I need you to scratch off the foil in the back and email me the codes." So the assistant emails the codes and redeems all the gift cards, and they lose all their money. Okay, another interesting attack that happened fairly frequently actually during COVID was the payroll deposit scam. So with the payroll deposit scam, what happened was the hackers are pretending to be various employees in the company. So they'll just go onto LinkedIn, look up who various employees' names are, figure out who's in HR, and then they'll email the HR person saying, "Hey, I need you to change my direct deposit information on my account. Please change it to this." And if you don't have good procedures in place to verify that, you've just now updated your payroll information and you're paying the payroll of that employee into the wrong account, which belongs to the hackers. Okay, other scams, it's not just with money that the scammers are actually tricking people to transfer. They're also tricking people to send out confidential information. So somebody might pretend to be the sales manager, sending a message to a salesperson saying, "Hey, I'm just out at a client's right now. Can you please send me our client list?" Or can you send me the payroll information for all of the top executives, right? So this is a scam that actually happened to the CEO of Snapchat, where somebody pretended to be the CEO, sent a message to the HR department saying, "We're reevaluating all executive bonuses. Please send me a list of all of the executive compensation structures to this email address." So somebody typed it all up in a nice Excel spreadsheet and sent it out. They're also tricking people to send out corporate secrets, like, "Hey, can you send me the source code for this?" Or "Can you send me some confidential information about this stuff?" And people are getting tricked to send those details out. And once the bad guys have that information, they now come back and they extort you by saying, "Okay, I've got your client list. If you don't want me to share it with all of your competitors, you have to pay me X amount of dollars in ransom." So that's how the attackers are monetizing these types of attacks. So as I mentioned, the only way to protect yourself against this is to put processes in place and make sure that you have a process to authenticate any sensitive request. So anytime somebody's asking for any sensitive information or anything that's financially related, make sure that you verify it either by calling or seeing the person in person. Just make a phone call. So it should be you that initiates it. You should not actually rely on the phone call coming in, because a phone call coming in can actually have fake caller ID, especially to a person that you've never spoken to before. But even to somebody that you have spoken to before, here's where it gets more interesting. The attacks are getting more and more sophisticated. So imagine somebody phoning you and he sounds exactly like your manager. Maybe he's even doing a video call with you. So he looks and he sounds exactly like your manager and he's asking you to do something. So these types of attacks are coming. They're not widespread just yet, but there's a technology called deepfake that actually allows people to actually create videos that have the exact mannerisms and the voice and the look of a real person. So highly recommended to put some kind of authentication mechanism in place, which in this case would be, instead of you taking the inbound call, you actually phone on an outbound to actually make sure that you're really calling the person. So don't fall victim to these extortion attempts. Okay, I'd like to cover a few more ways that the bad guys are getting stuff in front of the victims. It's not just through email. Phishing attacks are now actually done fairly frequently through using a technique called smishing, which is essentially using SMS. So here's a couple examples here. CIBC payment, you receive this amount of dollars, click this link, which takes you to a fake CIBC site designed to steal your bank credentials. Here's an interesting one where, and this happened in a number of countries actually during COVID, where it said you've been detected violating stay-at-home orders X number of times. You have to pay this fine. Click on this link, and it takes you to a fake website where you punch in your credit card number and actually pay the criminals for supposedly breaking a stay-at-home order, which you probably didn't. Okay, so best practice is just don't click on any SMS links. Okay, you shouldn't be getting hardly anything via SMS. Okay, and final way that bad guys are still getting stuff in is the good old-fashioned telephone is still alive and well. Okay, so there are still attackers that are pretending to be from Microsoft or Shaw or TELUS, phoning people up that actually say, hey, we've detected your computer's been infected with a virus. We need to log in and actually clean it up. Can you go to this website, install the remote control software, and we'll remote in and remove the fake virus that they're actually telling you about. And of course, once they log in is actually when they install the malware on your systems. Okay, so if you get a phone call from Microsoft or Shaw or TELUS or the CRA claiming that you haven't paid funds, best thing to do is to just hang up, because they don't contact people that way. Okay, and then so moving on, like other ways that you need to protect yourself is the most important thing that differentiates you from the hacker is your identity. Okay, and your identity is in the form of a username and a password. Okay, so that's in many cases the only thing that's keeping you from keeping a hacker from accessing something that only you're supposed to have access to is them not knowing your username and password. So how is it hackers actually get access to passwords? Okay, they use a lot of techniques. One of them is just password guessing, right? So they might look you up on Facebook and LinkedIn and see that, oh, you've got a dog named Fido, or you have a birthday on this date, or maybe you're a Calgary Flames fan, and they'll just try various combinations. And chances are there are a lot of people that actually still use their pet's name or their favorite hockey team, and the bad guys just after a few guesses will actually get in. Another way is a brute force attack. So it literally takes a split second running through a high-powered computer to crack an 8-digit password. Okay, so brute force attacks are another way. Okay, phishing attacks, which we talked about earlier, where you're tricked to type in a username and password. Other ways are where other sites, Amanda actually talked about how various sites got compromised, right? Like Best Buy or Facebook, or these sites have all been recently hacked, and the bad guys have actually stolen the password lists. And when they have the password list, if you happen to be using the same username and password on multiple sites, well, guess what? They can just use that password to log into it and get access to something they're not supposed to. Okay, and another way is through malware, right? So on a compromised computer, it's possible that a hacker may have installed a keylogger and they're capturing your keystrokes. So as you're typing in usernames and passwords, they're stealing those as well. And then there's another type of attack called a man-in-the-middle attack. So this is if you're actually using illegitimate VPN services, free Wi-Fi, or unsecure networks. Attackers can actually insert themselves in between and potentially listen in and steal your usernames and passwords. So all of this information is actually widely available on the dark web. So the stolen usernames and passwords are bought and sold on the dark web, which is where criminals that want to actually hack into things can just buy your password and log into your stuff. Okay, so what can you do to protect yourself? Number one thing is use strong passwords. So use passphrases instead of passwords. So my recommendation is to actually use a phrase that something that doesn't totally make sense, like the sky is green or something like that, and replace some of the letters with numbers and use some punctuation in the middle as well as capitalization. So it makes it easy for you to type the password out, easy for you to remember, but very difficult to guess. So passwords, ideally a safe, secure password can be like 15 to 20 characters long. So by using phrases, it's actually a lot easier to actually work with those. Okay, don't write down your passwords on sticky notes. It's a bad idea. And we still see people actually writing their passwords and sticking them on their monitors or in the boardrooms or under the keyboards. Don't do that. Okay, only share passwords securely. So we don't recommend sharing passwords at all if possible, but we do understand that sometimes you do have to have a password that's shared with multiple people. The best way to do that is to share it securely using a password manager. So Amanda talked a little bit about password management. If you guys would like more information on them, there are a whole bunch of different password managers that you can use. Some of them are more secure than others. Okay. Other important criteria for making sure that your passwords are safe is to use different passwords for everything. Okay, it's a really bad idea to use the same password for multiple sites, because when one site gets compromised and they steal the password list, they can actually log into other sites that use the same password. So make sure you change your passwords to something that's different for every site. Okay, and I also get asked now fairly frequently, what about like changing your password regularly? Okay, like it used to be standard security practice to actually force people to change passwords every 90 days. The consensus now with security professionals is it actually doesn't really add a lot of security. And in fact, actually sometimes actually makes passwords less secure, because when you actually have forced people to change their passwords, they're just maybe tacking on a number or using an obvious password. I actually know somebody that used to use the password like summer 2020, fall 2020, winter 2020, winter 2021, and then they'll just tack it on, which makes it really easy for the hackers to guess what the next iteration of the password is going to be. So what we find is people tend to forget their passwords, or people write them down, or they use the same passwords everywhere so they don't forget. And that actually makes things less secure when you force passwords to expire. So we're moving towards actually convincing all of our clients to not have passwords expiring at all anymore, but enforcing things like multi-factor authentication and long and complex passwords. Okay, so what exactly is multi-factor authentication? So I think you guys have been recently going through a project to deploy this. Multi-factor authentication is one of the most effective ways to actually protect your credentials. It will actually block 99.9% of attempts to compromise your account. Okay, so we recommend enabling multi-factor authentication not just on your work accounts, but on everything. So log into your Facebook account and turn on MFA. Log into LinkedIn, turn it on there. Log into all of your accounts and actually turn on MFA where it's available. Okay, because it makes it, again, 99.9% more secure. But MFA isn't totally perfect. So some of the things to watch out for with MFA is, especially with the Microsoft Authenticator or with many of the apps that now have a pop-up that says, there's been a logon attempt, do you approve and deny it? Make sure you do not approve any logon attempts unless you are 110% certain that you initiated it, okay? Because the hackers, if they stole the password, might actually be logging in, and if they're logging in, you're getting the MFA request, and if you hit approve, you have just actually allowed the hacker to log in. So it's not 100% perfect, but it definitely makes the account much more secure. Some other ways that the hackers are getting through, I'm not going to go into too much technical detail, but there are ways that the hackers can actually use like APIs to actually connect into systems bypassing MFA. Or they're also doing SIM jacking, where they're actually stealing your SIM card by actually phoning up Bell or Telus or Rogers, whoever your cell phone provider is, and saying, hey, I've lost my cell phone. Can you issue a new SIM card to me? And they actually pretend to be you, get a new SIM card issued, activated on their phone, and now the MFA code is going to their device instead of yours. So it's not 100% perfect, but it makes a huge difference. So what do we have in place for Pieridae to actually help you stay protected? So I talked about a lot of different threats. And I just want to share with you some of the different layers. We have a lot of layers in place, but some of the ones to highlight is we have a dark web defender product where we actually get notifications anytime a pieridaeenergy.com email address is being sold on the dark web. So if we see credentials being leaked for that, we can actually notify the user and have them change the affected passwords on whatever sites they've used that on right away, so that it minimizes the damage. Okay, we do a lot of preventative maintenance on your network to ensure that things are secure, everything's up and running. One of those is actually making sure that your systems are patched. So all of your servers and your desktop and laptop computers are all updated with the latest security updates, not just the Windows updates, but also the commonly used software as well, like Java and Adobe Acrobat and Office and all the programs that the attackers are sometimes using to compromise the networks. So we monitor, and we have a network monitoring and security operations center that actually monitors for weird behaviors, as well as making sure that all of your different security layers are working properly. And one of the tools that is probably the most important one for us is actually it's an endpoint detection and response tool that is powered by artificial intelligence. So this tool ensures that it's an antivirus replacement. So it's actually a tool that not just matches files to known viruses, but it's constantly looking at the behavior of everything that's running on your computer. And when it sees something that behaves like malware, it shuts it down. So it's very, very intelligent software that was historically only available to Fortune 500 companies. But because we are actually part of an elite group of IT managed service providers that are security focused, we have access to actually provide those tools to you. We also have an AI-based spam filter. Again, I mentioned that spam filters are not 100% perfect. The bad guys are always trying to find ways to sneak in. So it blocks a lot of it, but please be careful with messages coming in. We also have a policy management portal to actually help Amanda in managing security and acceptable use policies and those types of things to make sure that everybody has read those. We have intelligent firewalls and gateways. We have a multi-tiered data protection and backup solution. So we back up all of your Microsoft 365 stuff. We back up all of your servers, and these are actually backed up in multiple layers so that it is not easy for a hacker to be able to delete the backups. Okay, and of course we are enforcing multi-factor authentication on your 365 accounts as well as remote access. So we have a lot of different security layers. Those are just a few of the ones that I wanted to highlight. Okay, but even with all of those security layers, we cannot guarantee that a breach won't happen. Okay, remember the threat is asymmetrical, so there is actually the possibility that some layers of the system might actually get breached, but we hope to have enough layers in place that if it does happen, that we are able to block it from doing any significant damage. Okay, so just a quick summary. What can you do to help us all stay safe? Okay, number one thing is protect your passwords. Okay, make sure you follow good password policies, long passwords that are complex and secure using passphrases. Enable multi-factor authentication, use different passwords everywhere, don't share your passwords, don't write them down, and use a password manager that is secure to actually help you manage all of these passwords. Keep software up to date. So with all of your work computers, we do this part for you, but a lot of you are actually now connecting from home and also connecting from your smartphones and devices. So keeping software up to date is not just about the work computers and the servers and the networking equipment that we manage. It's also about making sure that your home computer that you're accessing the network from is secure, and your mobile devices like your iPhones and your Android devices are up to date as well, because iPhones and Android devices are simply pocket computers. So even though malware is not common on those, it is still a possibility, and a lot of the updates for your phones are actually to fix security issues. Okay, and then the third one is be vigilant and adhere to the policies. So make sure that when you get asked for something that's sensitive, that you actually authenticate the request first to make 110% certain that it is a legitimate request before you go and transfer money or send out some confidential information. Okay, so as long as you follow those three things, you should be in really good shape. And it also doesn't hurt to be a little bit paranoid as well, because as I mentioned, there's a lot of bad stuff out there that's happening. Okay, so we're happy to be launching our 2021 cybersecurity training program. So Amanda will actually be getting all of you to actually log into the dashboard. So this is actually going to be hopefully available tomorrow. So we actually are just uploading the content right now, and we hope to have it actually live by tomorrow evening. And we'll actually have that so that you can actually watch the program and just answer a few questions on the quiz, and you should be good to go. So I want to thank all of you guys for your attention here. I know that your time is valuable, and this cyber awareness training, this is actually one of the most important things to actually keep your business safe and secure. So thank you for taking the time here today, and I want to thank you for doing your part in building this culture of security to keep our company secure. So with that, I will pass the control back to Amanda if you have any questions.
Well, thank you very much, Vince, for this really fantastic lunch and learn about cybersecurity. I know that we definitely have seen a few of those examples that you've shown us. And as you mentioned, everything's getting pretty sophisticated. So we do need to be on alert, and even more so now than ever. And so thank you so much for those tips. And, hopefully we can utilize them to help ourselves here. And as Vince mentioned in the end, we are launching our cybersecurity training. So look for my email, and also be sure to make sure that you look at the email carefully that it is a valid one and not one of a phishing one that you might see. And we'll let you know when the phishing campaign comes out, but the first piece is the cybersecurity training. So with that being said, thank you again, Vince. I know that we're out of time, but if you guys do have any questions, feel free to send them to me, and I will forward them to Vince. So with that being said, thank you again, everybody, and thank you for taking time from your lunch to join in this very valuable meeting. Thanks, Vince. Thanks, everybody.
Right. Thanks, everyone. Bye for now.
Thank you.
Thank you.